Um, Good morning. It's a complicated issue. If churches and other Christian organizations should be on social media that are in some parts gray zones or problematic, and in other parts helpful. I think lots of people have been going on about this for a very long time, and a solution has not been found. We have some proponents to say, leave it all, go off to the monasteries. Be a holy huddle and live a nice life in a digital space. But others say we've got a responsibility towards our society. As Philip Lee just said, counter speech is a very relevant thing. I prepared a few slides, which I'm going to share soon. First, some ethical quotes to think about certain aspects, and then one with a bit of social media management issues where we could look into a more strategic way. I'm now sharing my screen. And as it's set up in a pro and contra, I'm putting out the case for staying on X and Meta and other cases, because I think that's, for Christian churches, a good thing to do. When we look into ethical things, I remember a quote by Immanuel Kant: "Out of the crooked timber of humanity, no straight thing was ever made." And I think that goes for many things. That goes also for social media. So it's not a clear-cut case. Things are problematic, and we need to look into them and into all the crookedness that our human form brings with it. There's great chances and things to do. When we look at churches, scripture says Christians should be salt and light. And the German saying is, salt has a nice place in the salt pot, but the pot is not what the salt is for. Salt needs to go somewhere else and be effective. And I think we as Christians are called to do that. And we can even do that in small forms. I remember recently Elon Musk proposed on X that Germans should vote for a far-right party. I got his own AI to say that's false, and 40,000 people looked at that. So and even though I'm not a professional communicator, in some parts I've become a bit more of a communicator in my way. I'm a manager in digital and IT. But even, that counter speech was seen by 40,000 people. Or a couple of years back when Jan Böhmermann, who's a big comedian in Germany, like Bill Maher in the US, retweeted one of my posts, also in favor of humanity and against far-right policies, that also gained huge significance. So every other year, even folk who aren't fully communicating on these platforms can have a chance to have counter speech seen by many, many people and have an impact. So, and I think Christians should be salt and light and do counter speech to hate speech and problematic issues. Another way, when we look at scripture, I'm learning from a local bikers church service here, and all the bikers looked at a word from Matthew when it says like there was the field and the wheat was in it, but then there were the weeds under the wheat. And like the workers asked the master, shall we put out the weeds? And he said, no, leave it. Let it grow together, and in the end, we'll sort it out. And I think that picture can be looked at social media, and we can also think, shall we now try to crop out channels we don't like? But maybe we do more hurt than good with that. And on that issue, the notion was let it both grow, and in the end, we'll sort it out. Alistair McIntosh, who was today heard on the BBC in the Thought of the Day, is a Quaker in Glasgow, and he was critical of his main organization who decided to leave X. And he said, no, the Quaker way, as it was stated in the Nobel Peace Prize citation from 1947, is to build up in a spirit of love what has been destroyed in a spirit of hatred. God has angels enough in heaven. So let's be part in our society, and let's try to influence our society for the good. And in the digital realm, for me, that's also be part of social media and try to be an influence for the good. And each of us can do that. When we look at an organizational point of view, so we had some ethical considerations, now we look on strategy. The thing is, do not put all your eggs in one basket, is a saying in the British world. And I think I think of somebody going to market with 2 baskets of eggs, and when the handle breaks and one basket falls down and you lose everything, but the other basket's still there, so you don't go hungry, you still have something. And I think we as organizations need to make sure to be strategic in our social media use. These platforms change quickly. We saw in the pandemic, new platforms rose quickly to fame and then faded quickly after the pandemic was over, e.g. Clubhouse. We saw other platforms changed ownership, e.g. Twitter. Twitter a couple of years ago was a very different thing than from X today. And maybe it's a very different thing from X in 3 years' time. So TikTok, massive changes in the US. They had to shut it down. Maybe it will change ownership. Social media platforms are changing all the time. And I think one way to hedge against these risks is to be on several, to have a presence there. And also to look at the parts of society that take care of things. If you look in the European Union, we have the Digital Services Act. You can download the data. I downloaded lots of data yesterday. Every day, you have about 70, like 70 gigabytes of moderation data for stuff that was put down from the internet. And you can look here, I just brought one graph, decision and detection automation. So in the last, I think, 30 days, that graph is true, we had 875 million fully automated decisions that were made in the EU to take down stuff from the internet, and almost as much decisions that were made by hand. And you can look in all the data on the side of the Digital Services Act. They've got a great transparency report, and you can even download many, many gigabytes of data if your IT can handle that and try to do analytics out of that. So being part of society that has laws and regulations to counter some of the problematic sides, I think we need to look at several issues when we want to have strategic notion towards our social media use. I just outlined a few. One thing is broader audience reach. Different social media platforms cater to different demographics. You will reach very different people on TikTok than on LinkedIn, than on Instagram, than on Twitter. So if you as an organization or a church want to reach many people, I think you need to be on many platforms. The same goes for visibility and content variety. Like a video of somebody dancing will work on some platforms, but not on others. And a short text with a brilliant quote, vice versa. So if your organization has several content pieces, it's good for you to be on several platforms to basically make your content work as good as you can. Risk mitigation, platforms changes, algorithm changes, many things changes. And by being on several platforms, we are less likely to be hurt by one big change because we can
Let me have a look.
Enhanced interaction. We are, Ralf-Peter, could you please mute somebody who's making sound that's not scheduled? Thank you. Enhanced interaction, we get feedback engagement on platforms, and also with crisis communication. When somebody criticizes our organizations or the beliefs we stand for, if we are on the platform and have a relevant network, we can interact. SEO and digital footprint, we want to be found with our content, and it helps to be on many platforms to gain digital reputation also for security software that's filtering you if you've got a poor reputation, purely technical. Analytics and insights, you gain different analytics from each platform, and adaptability. Old platforms sometimes wither and new platforms grow. We need to be changing there all the time. So my point of view is we should stay on many platforms as long as they're in the law. And I think the church is called to be salt and light on many platforms. Thank you for your attention.